Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Lichter, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project for the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I am a member of the Kenosha History Center and have volunteered there since 2015. We hope that you will enjoy these programs. I'm with Bob Hoffman, former employee of Snap-on Tools. Hello, Bob, and welcome.
Hi, Bob.
Bob, are you originally from Kenosha?
I am. Born and raised.
Okay. And when did you start working at Snap-on Tools?
That was February of 72.
Okay. And you worked there how long?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. How were you hired, and what was that hiring experience like?
Well, before I was hired, I tried to get in there a couple of years before that. They weren't hiring at the time. And at that time, the human resource fella lived down the road from me, and I grew up with his kids. So I'd knock on his door and, hey, are you hiring? And he'd say, well, no. But I said, well, when you are, could you think of me? And he goes, sure. And one day he called. I was working at another shop, and he said, we'd like you to come in for an interview, and the rest is history.
Wow. Okay. What types of products or services did you do for Snap-on?
Well, I worked in the drop forge. I was a polisher. I worked in plating. I was a material handler. And that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you get to work?
Well, I drove myself at first because I was on like third shift when I first started. And then for almost all the years I was on first shift, I rode with another guy that I worked with. He lived real close, and we rode together.
Okay. And what was your first job there?
Down at the drop forge.
Drop forge.
I was a heater down there, yeah.
What was that
I
process
had to
like?
heat all the steel bars in a furnace. And then once they were red hot, I would have to handle one at a time to the hammerman. And he would hammer out the wrench, and then from his die it would go to the trimmer, and I'd have to get another one. So I'm constantly feeding this hot metal to this hammerman.
Was there any protective clothing or safety rules with that?
Well, you know, safety glasses, earmuffs, gloves. I ended up wearing insulated underwear. This was in the springtime, and I was in front of that furnace. It was so hot. I wore insulated underwear, flannel shirts, coveralls, and I'd still, at the end of the day, I'm still like sunburned right through my clothes. It was so hot.
And so you had to handle the metal with the big tongs?
Yeah, I had these big tongs, and I'd have to go into that furnace and then hand it to him, and sometimes we'd do double bars, and then I have to put it back in the furnace after he used half of it, you know. So you're constantly gripping, and that went on all day.
Well, how big were those pieces of metal?
Well, some of them were like for your great big wrenches, you know, they were, well, I don't know, 3 feet long maybe. Most of them were for your smaller wrenches, and I don't know, anywhere from a foot to 2 foot, maybe a little more.
Okay. So the heater and then the ham.
Then the hammerman is the one that runs the die. He hammers out the wrench. And then from there it goes to a trimmer. He trims off all the excess.
What did he use to trim it?
There was a die,
Okay.
you know, it was like a punch press.
What were some of the other challenges with that job?
Well, the noise was unbelievable. Those hammers hitting, you know, some of them were huge and constant pounding. The floor is shaking. So no matter where you were, the floor is shaking, you know.
Okay. And that was a represented job, a union job?
That was a union job,
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
But I was able to transfer out of there. I wasn't there but a few months.
Okay.
Then I got into polishing over there. So then for 20 years I polished.
Okay. Do you remember what your hourly wage was in 1972?
I was piecework.
Oh.
So the more pieces I did per hour, the more money I made. I want to say my base rate was around $2.50 an hour, and then I had cost of living, and I don't know what the cost of living at that time was. Maybe $5 an hour, or $4 an hour.
Okay. So then, with piecework, the more pieces you produced in an hour, that could
Correct.
add to your hourly.
They would have a rate on every job, and well, let's just say I had to do 100 pieces an hour just to make base rate, to make that $2.50. If I made 200%, which is double what the base rate was, well, then I made, say $5 an hour on my, okay? So the more pieces that I made every hour, the more money in my pocket. So it was beneficial to me to go as fast as I could go.
Okay.
But I still had to do the good job.
Sure. Was that just the regular production, or were there special orders in some cases? Or?
Well, there was some special orders. We had done stuff for NASA when they first started sending people to the moon and that.
Wow.
We did some prototype tools that they took to the moon. And then for a while, I remember Cadillac was, when you bought a certain Cadillac, in the glove box was a small set of wrenches. So we made these special set of wrenches for Cadillacs. I remember that was a long time ago.
Okay.
But,
Was there any other, NASA, Cadillac, any other big corporations that got any specialized tooling like that?
Well, yeah, the railroads. We used to do some stuff for box cars and that. They were big industrial. It would go on. The nuts that they went on were massive, and they'd have to use a sledgehammer to hit this, to knock a nut off. I don't know exactly how, but we used to make stuff like that.
Okay. So what you got to the polishing department? What was a typical day like there?
Well, all our raw forgings would come from the forge shop in big metal tubs. They would just throw them all in there, depending on the size. There might be 5,000 pieces in there, there might have been 100. And depending on how many guys were in that day polishing, if there's 1,000 pieces in the order and you had 10 guys, each guy got 100 pieces. You ran that 100, and they're on a board, then there was the next job. So as soon as you were done, you started the next job and the next job. So the guys that were faster, of course, were ahead of you, and then that's how the day went.
Okay. If you had a problem of any sorts, maybe you had a safety concern or a problem with quality, what would be the path for that?
Well, we had safety people that throughout the shop. So like I had one in my area, and if there was ever a safety concern, I could take it to them, and they would take it to the channels up front. All the quality in that, there was inspectors that walked around all the time and inspected.
Okay.
So no matter what I was running, there was somebody coming and checking that stuff.
Was that like a random reach in and pick up a wrench? And
Yeah, they would. Yeah, a lot of the stuff I would put it in a pan before it got dumped. They would just get in there and they'd grab a whole bunch, and they knew what they're looking for, and they'd look, and if it was all okay. If not, go through them all, correct them.
What would happen to you then if you had some?
Oh, that's my own time.
Sure, that cuts into your...
Cuts into my pay.
Yeah.
I got to go back and I got to rework stuff that I did. So that's my own time now.
So no reason to rush through anything?
Well, you go as fast as you can, but you still got to do it right,
Get it.
Right?
How about did you have a supervisor reported to, or how did that...
I had a direct supervisor, sure. And he had an office right in our department. So he was always around if we had any problems. Go see him. Or
how about the actual polishing? What were some of the other challenges? Physical challenges, maybe? With
physical, sure.
What'd that all look like? Your polishing station.
Well, it was our our polishing jacks were old. They were from in the 40s. And you had two big, you couldn't see them, they were covered up, but big motors and then a big shaft. And one guy would run on this side wheel and one guy would run on this side. So we could be doing two different things. They were independent of each other, you know. We used abrasive belts with hard rubber wheels, and we would just have to run the wrenches on them, or we'd spin sockets or hammers. I mean, we made everything when I first started. Everything was made in Kenosha.
So wrenches, sockets,
Sure,
hammers?
all pry bars, screwdrivers, everything that Snap-on made just about we made in Kenosha. And then they started farming that stuff out to other shops. But
Okay. And then one question, how did changes in technology or world events or management decisions change your job like that?
well, part of that is they built new plants that were newer, probably safer in a way. So they sent a lot of our work to these new plants. You know, Kenosha needed upgrading, and I think other states were giving them a lot of incentives to come and build there. So they would spend their money like in Tennessee to build a plant instead of throwing the money at Kenosha, which was, at that time, was the second oldest plant they had.
Okay. Where was the first oldest?
I think it was Mount Carmel, Illinois.
Okay. Okay. What about the, with that polishing, with the like physical challenges with
Sure.
that? What was that?
Well,
Doing that?
the bigger the tool, the harder you had to push. So you're forcibly pushing into that belt,
Okay.
you know, and you're manipulating that tool to get the finish that you wanted.
Okay. How about social activities? Snap-on, big company. Did they have any clubs, picnics, bowling teams, things like that?
Yeah, they were real good about all of that. Well, we had a golf league forever, but they did a lot for the family stuff and for kids. We had fishing derbies in the summer, ice fishing derbies, Packer games, Cubs baseball, different shows and stuff. There's always something with the club that would, so whatever your likes, you could find something through the year to go with the club, you know, and it was always real reasonable because the club paid the majority of whatever, you know.
Okay. And during your time there, what was the number of employees at that time?
Oh gosh, I want to say around 350 at the best.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong, but I think it was a big number. We had 3 full shifts, so a lot of people.
Did you work a lot of overtime?
There were some times we worked a lot of overtime.
Okay. Now, Snap-on being
They're
known all over
worldwide.
the world,
Right,
you know.
right.
Did ever meet anybody that came around, like on tour there or anything?
I met a couple interesting people. They had tours. I'll bet you every week there was tours coming through.
Okay.
And sometimes they would give you a heads up, hey, so-and-so's coming, you know. And one time it was when Lee Dreyfus was our governor.
Governor of Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Okay.
So him and his entourage came through, and he had he was signature red vest, you know. Well, I knew right away who that was, so I got to meet him and talk to him. And another time Bart Starr came,
Oh,
and I enjoyed that because I was a big Packer fan.
sure.
So he was very, very nice fella.
What was the best part of working at Snap-on?
Well, it was steady work.
Okay.
I got to meet a lot of nice people. And, you know, some of the people, I still see them. Now, I don't see too many anymore, but I still see them, the ones that are still around. So,
What about the toughest part or the hardest part of working there?
well, the physical.
Okay.
It's a very physical job. There was times that I'd come home and my hands, I had so many calluses and blisters on them that I could hardly pull my pants up, you know. No matter how much tape you put on them and how many gloves you wear, because you're constantly gripping and pushing and all that heat. It just, my hands were like iron at that time, you know.
Okay. Any other interesting stories or anecdotes or anything you remember?
Well, I don't know. We used to have our laughs, you know. We had some pranks of pull and guys would laugh, but kind of the typical stuff, you know. Of course, it was funnier if you were there, you know.
Sure. All right. And what were circumstances of your leaving there then?
Well, things slowed down. Almost all the wrenches, probably the last couple of years that I was there, they sent them all to the 2 plants they built in Tennessee. Most of the sockets they sent to Milwaukee. And Kenosha was left with some specialty stuff and some of the railroad stuff, and they kind of gave Kenosha the crumbs, you know. So I got caught up in a numbers game where we didn't need so many people left anymore, and I happen to be one of those numbers that we don't need you.
Yeah, so after just about 20 years then.
I had 20 years, yeah. So the guys that seniority-wise that were ahead of me, they ended up working, I think it was another 3 or 4 years, and they finally closed the doors on manufacturing.
And when was that?
Oh gosh. No, maybe it was even longer than that.
If you left.
I thought it was, well, I left in 90, it was 92, so 96 or 97, I think, maybe.
Okay. I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. When you went from job to job, did you get specialized training or somebody broke you in somehow?
Well, yeah, the polishing, well, everything there was pretty much hands-on training.
Okay.
You know, if you, like when I first started polishing, they would have someone kind of sit by you for a day or so and say, all right, this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you the basics, and you got to pick it up from there. And then you would watch other guys and see what they do. And I'd ask questions, you know. And then another guy would always just say, you know, push as hard as you can and turn this way. And so,
As long as it came out nice and shiny.
well, yeah, it had to come out right.
Okay. All right. Guess I want to thank you, unless you had anything else to share.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It brings back some memories and some things, you know, you forget about, but thanks for letting me share a little with you.
Well, thank you on behalf of the Kenosha History Center and Kenosha Community Media. Thank you for participating in the Kenosha Voices project.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.